Another jury tips video. Today we'll be looking at high-rise design. At the end of this video, I would have shared with you some very important aspects of your jury presentation if you are doing a mixed-use high-rise design. Number one is the choice of your structural layout and system. You should have at least an idea of the types of structural system you'll be using in that design of the high-rise. It's important to understand the following things when discussing your structural system. One is the positioning of the core and the interaction of the core with the columns in the building. Secondly is your proposal for column spaces within the building. And thirdly is that you establish your grid spacing within the building. These three things will enable you to explain comprehensively your proposed structural system. At the heart of the structural system is understanding the core and its functions. The core in the high-rise is there to stabilize the structure and also to help in vertical circulation within the structure. It can also have some services and ducts that allows vertical transportation within the structures. Number two, because you are designing a mixed-use high-rise, it's important to work on your waste or chute system. This is very important because we might have different segments like residential, office spaces, and commercial spaces. So the vertical transfer of waste from the top to the base of the building, should be an important aspect of your research. I've already talked about core designs, but most times core can also contain the vertical chute system for waste disposal, and then the chute system goes down to the ground floor or basement where the waste is collected and taken off the building. We should also consider adding a mechanical flow, especially between different zones within the high-rise. So let's say you have the office zone separate from the residential zone. In order for you to collate the pipes from different areas in the toilets into the chute system or into the core, a mechanical flow can help you to do that and then redirect them into the vertical routes that you've planned for them before. So introducing a mechanical flow in the high-rise will help you do that. Next is basement services. The design of high-rise always results to deep foundations. Sometimes the foundations might not be that deep depending on the soil structure, but there is always opportunity to have services in your basement, such as underground parking and mechanical and electrical rooms. When designing this basement, it's important or paramount to guard against water inflow into the basement. So if you are going to have a basement parking, for example, you don't start ramping into the basement from outside. That will create a drainage problem because water flows into the drainage. So you can drive into the basement. When it's covered, then you can decide to ramp down from a covered position. Basement services can be very good and important in designing a high-rise. Fire escape services must also be considered and explained while designing your high-rise. You can't design your high-rise without giving a good example of how people will be evacuated in terms of fire. So we need fire-rated staircases, fire-rated escape routes that will enable people to evacuate the high-rise. It's not a bad idea to create possible escape routes or muster points on the rooftop and also on the ground floor. Next is wind control in high-rise. One of the major challenges in high-rise building is the ability to withstand wind pressure. So if you are designing a high-rise building, there must be some aspect of wind control in terms of your facade design, either in terms of form or in terms of facade finish, to control the amount of wind that will affect the building. Now, it is not your duty to design that in detail, but it's also important that you have an idea that, okay, high-rise buildings interact with wind pressure, and so I have some idea with that, and I've done some considerations to that. Next is designing the commercial spaces within the high-rise. I'm taking that we are designing a mixed-use high-rise. We have the commercial spaces at the lower level, the office spaces at the mid-level, and the residential spaces at the higher level. In designing the commercial spaces on the ground floor, it's important to understand that those spaces will have both front of house activity and back of house activities, where maintenance and other services are carried out to aid the commercial activities or other public activities on the lower floors. Now, the main issue in the design of high-rise building is the ability to separate traffic of different users within the mixed-use high-rise building. So let's take, for example, what we are doing this semester. We have commercial floors on the lower level. Offices are still commercial floors, but the lower level, let's say public floors, then offices, then residential. The main challenge of this design is to avoid conflicts in circulation. So you're able to separate the residential vertical access from the commercial vertical access. So it's important when designing let's say your core system, for example, to have different sections of lifts for the residential aspect and different sections of lifts for the commercial aspect. This will enable you to solve the problem of circulation. If you can also give them different parking and different accesses into building to improve privacy for the residential users, that will enable you to solve the major problem of the high-rise design. When developing a concept, you should always look at the most prominent problem that is located within a design and ensure that your concept is solving that problem. An understanding of the structural system and the functional needs of the high-rise building will enable you to develop a concept. So I will always advise that your concept should solve the structural needs of the building to a certain degree and also the functional needs of the building. The solution to these two can now bring itself out in the aesthetic appeal of the building. Let it not start the other way around, focusing on the aesthetic appeal of the building before you go down to solve the functional and structural needs. Even if that's the way the thought came to you, when presenting it, you should start from the structural and functional needs and end with the aesthetic appeal of your building. Finally, this is something I noticed in the presentation. When producing your site plan for a high-rise building, in most cases, the footprint of the building is far more bigger than the area of the building that becomes the high-rise. So it's always important in your site plan to show that particular section of the building that transforms to become the high-rise, while also showing the complete outline of the building. Most of the graphics I saw in the prelim just showed the entire outline of the building without indicating the area of the building that later became the section that the high-rise sits on. In your ground floor, first floor and second floor, third floor, where the podium of the building is still being designed, having a dotted line to show the area that the high-rise emanates from will enable people to see if you have solved the structural problems that might emanate from that section, and then the position of your core should be highlighted. It's very important that your core walls are thicker than the normal walls in your floor plan so that somebody can easily recognize your core and then the positions of the core and how they relate with the high-rise. So in summary, you should sort out your structural system with a consideration to your column spacing, grids, core. You should also look at the impact of wind on your building. You should look at the vertical circulation systems for waste and water. You should look at your concept development. You should also look at effective zoning of different users within the building. And finally, on how to go about presenting your work graphically and making sure that it's done in a clear and understandable manner. So thanks for watching. I wish you the best in your presentation. I'll catch you in my next video. Peace.